Gathering data on your fleet has never been easier. Real-time tracking from Quartix improves your productivity, cuts fuel consumption, and minimizes vehicle wear and tear. Quartix improves driving styles and safety, reduces paperwork, produces timesheets, and validates hours worked, all backed by award-winning customer service. To give you the complete picture. Every driver, every vehicle, every journey. Quartix, more than just vehicle tracking.
Veriforce is proud to announce the latest version of our Safeland USA accredited course called Basic Orientation 7.0. This is our flagship course that has been taken by over 1.6 million students nationwide. The newest version of this course is shorter than the last version, with condensed training and updated multimedia, but it still includes the same topics as previous courses. As always, the Safeland orientation remains with this employee through the career. It eliminates the redundancy of multiple orientations, and it stores all the training records in a single centralized database for everyone to use. Also, we offer two solutions for getting the training. You can either seek out Safeland training from one of our third-party providers, or you can send one of your instructors through our Train the Trainer program to teach your own employees. If you're interested in learning more, please contact our training sales department at 888-482-9101. That's 888-482-9101. Or you can email us at trainingsales@veriforce.com.
Welcome to the Risk Matrix Live. This is our 92nd episode and our third one live. Very, very exciting. I'm so glad they're here. Thank you for joining us. Some quick housekeeping notes before we dive into today's topic. Try to stay off camera if you can and on mute, and drop your questions in. We are going to get to all of your questions around the 30-minute mark or so. So please do type them in. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and of course, the Veriforce website. My name is Paula, and I have the privilege of working with the best podcast hosts on the planet, on the best podcast ever created. No exaggeration. These guys are the safety rock stars. And so let me introduce our host today. James Junkin is ASSP's 2024 Safety Professional of the Year for Training and Communications. James has personally trained over 40,000 safety professionals. Yes, you heard that right, 40,000. He serves as chairman of the board of the Veriforce Strategic Advisory Board and is CEO of Mariner Gulf Consulting Services, as well as a doctoral candidate and a professor. So when James talks safety, people listen. And co-host Dr. Martin, Dr. Logan F. Martin is a 35-year safety veteran and recipient of the prestigious Board of Global EHS Credentialing Impact Award and the National Safety Council Marion Martin Award for Women in Safety that have distinguished themselves in a variety of professional settings and personify excellence on the local, regional, national, or international level. Dr. Martin brings the gravitas of leadership as a two-term past president of the Board of Directors for the Board of Certified Safety Professionals, and is founder of LF Martin LLC, a consultancy with expertise in occupational safety management, construction safety, industrial hygiene, expert OSHA violation, and litigation support, and much more. Dr. Martin is truly a safety powerhouse. And on to today's guest, Chris England. Chris is a senior vice president of global business development at Veriforce, where he's worked since 2000, starting in safety and compliance for the oil and gas sector. He rose through leadership positions, including sales director and the VP of sales, helping grow Veriforce into a global company. He played a key role in developing Veriforce industry-leading contractor management solution and has been instrumental in the company's international expansion. And with that, I'm tossing it over to our hosts.
Hello, everybody, and welcome again to another episode of the Risk Matrix Live. We got a live studio audience today for third time. And with myself, Dr. Martin, and James Junkin as the host. Hi, James.
Hey, roll tide, man. I love Paula's introduction to us. We sound like we're the Joe Rogan of safety, baby. Joe Rogan of safety. That's
Like
awesome.
maybe we know what we're doing. I'm not
I
sure.
just copy off your page. That's what I do.
All right. Well, that's fine. I'll let you copy. And Chris, welcome to the show. Um, Before we get started, I'd like to read a little bit about our sponsor today. Everybody knows that we're powered by Veriforce. Thank you, Veriforce, for powering this podcast with us on it. We love coming out here and talking about different things that have to do with risk and safety. So thank you, Veriforce, for powering us. But today we're sponsored by Quartix, the #1 vehicle tracking solution for fleets of any size, helping fleet managers and business owners in service and transport industries improve visibility, streamline operations, and reduce costs. Monitor vehicle locations in real time, cut fuel costs and wasted time, increase driver productivity and visibility, and minimize downtime with maintenance alerts. Thank you, Cortex, for sponsoring this episode of the Risk Matrix. I'm going to pass it over to James, and James, you can introduce our guest topic and agenda.
Man, I'm so glad to have Chris England with us here on the Risk Matrix podcast. Chris and I have known each other for, I don't know, 15, 18 years. And really, Chris England is one of the reasons I am a safety professional today. And I remember meeting him during the onset of the BP oil spill. Chris led that effort on behalf of the legacy company of Veriforce PEC Safety. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today, our experiences during that time, and really how all that relates to contractor management and hiring clients, reducing risk, some of the tools that Veriforce has to offer, and ultimately what happens when you don't recognize the risk that's within your supply chain or your contractor base. Welcome, Chris, to the show.
Thank you guys very much for having me. I'm excited. I'm excited that you guys are going live now with this, and watching this grow and expand has been awesome. Thank you.
Cool. So why don't we start it off, because you guys met during the early stages of the BP oil spill, and as our listeners maybe do or do not know, we're right on the anniversary, or very close to the anniversary, of the onset of the BP oil spill. So why don't you guys tell us a little bit about that, your experiences there, and some thoughts.
Yeah, sure. I think that when the blowout happened in the Gulf of Mexico, people were using services like ours. After the Piper Alpha incident happened in the North Sea, PSM, and the need to really set programs around things, that it became law. Um, what happened in the Gulf of Mexico with the BP blowout really was a use case for our industry to spring forward, to really bring awareness to the need to manage third-party contractors and personnel that are coming onto our clients' sites, and the risk that's associated with doing that. When I first started, almost 25 years ago, I started when I was in 8th grade. So if you're trying to figure out how old I am,
There you go, man.
uh, I'd walk into people's safety professionals' offices, and it would look like I'll date myself again with a Dilbert reference, but the cartoon Dilbert, and they had the stacks of paper just all the way to the ceilings, and you would say, well, what are those? Well, those are safety questionnaires. Our contractors fill them out, once a quarter for every job that they're bidding for. Well, who's looking at those? That's when it gets difficult.
No one. No one's looking at those.
No
The only
one.
way they're looking at those is in a pile on your desk, right?
That's correct. And so, moving that to a standard, Charlie Carr really took the operator development team and got a group of operators in the Gulf of Mexico to help standardize a questionnaire. And that really, I think, it did. It started moving this forward. And I know that we get labeled a lot as pre-qualification, and that's where it started. I think that we as an industry have to move well beyond pre-qualification, and we
Right.
at Veriforce are trying to do that every day. But to begin, the pre-qualification and the awareness to even look at that and to grade it and to keep it updated. I think that I don't think we really understood the importance of it or where this was all gonna end up when we started that.
So as the legacy company, that was a little bit before my time, but not too much before my time. The idea of standardizing pre-qualification or qualification of contractors, moving away from paper to some sort of systematic approach that could be evaluated. That was kind of already taking shape prior to the Deepwater Horizon incident, and then 2010. The explosion, 11 dead, 5 million barrels worth of crude oil into the Gulf of Mexico. Talk to us a little bit about how you became aware of that and how PEC got involved in the response.
So it was, the blowout happened on April 20th. I think on April 21st, BP had responded, hiring a local safety company to try to begin to prepare responders. And really no one was prepared for what was about to happen. And so, I think they got 48 hours into that, trying to organize a response and the training development that had to happen. And so BP then turned to, at the time we were PEC Safety, which now obviously the Veriforce trainer instructor network that we have. Those are the guys that we plugged into. And so we were asked by BP to work with TEEX, the Texas A&M Engineering Extension, and we worked together to develop modules that were then blessed by OSHA to teach the responders that were going to be going into some, hazmat type of situations, and some just awareness level situations. And so we then reached out to our instructor network, and that's how James and we really it formed a bond that's a lifelong bond, because we were there in a need. It was all hands on deck. Within 48 hours, we had 50 training locations set up across the Gulf Coast, from Marathon, Florida to Port Arthur, Texas, and we had instructors with a curriculum that was blessed by TEEX and blessed by OSHA, in the hands of certified instructors, authorized instructors that had gone through a trainer. And that whole process, really looking back on it, was absolutely amazing. We couldn't have done any of that without our instructor network. The Keith Benoits of the world, the James Junkins of the world, the Ryan Just Clares of the world, right? These guys, they stepped up as well, and really, it felt like we were doing something more than work. We were doing something to help clean up, right, where we're all from. And so that was also a really important aspect of why PEC got involved. But yeah, and then within a week, we were training. And I think in the first 90 days, we trained as an organization with our network. We trained 147,000 responders in the first 90 days after that blowout.
That's where a lot of those numbers come from when they say James has trained 40,000 people. A lot of them came from that time. And just kind of echo what you said. I was reflecting back this Sunday. It was Easter, and is also Deepwater Horizon in 15 years, and just how proud I was to be a small part of a group of people that helped save our way of life. Our community. This was home. And people were terrified of what life might be like. And PEC played and later now Veriforce, an integral part in ensuring that the cleanup took place, but it got done safely. it was done safely. And the ability to track training, your instructor network, you know, was, I'm sure, a big decision making in BP choosing PEC to do that.
Absolutely. Well, Rick Ingram, was a huge part of that. Rick Ingram was a PEC instructor, and he knew the network that we had created, and he knew that we had a badge and that we were already tracking people so that redundant training wasn't happening, and we were tracking refreshers, and so that was a huge part of our instructor network and what we had built, as far as a standardized orientation and trying to help the oil and gas industry at the time standardize their approach. That definitely, BP looked at that and said, well, we need a standardized approach in order to truly do this. And I think it speaks for a level of standardization to start with. You crawl before you walk, before you run. I think you have to have standardization, right, to have a good base, to have the roots of what you're trying to grow.
Yeah.
They saw
I mean,
that.
I hear you, Chris. I mean, the base, planning the base and getting the base in place is a really good place to start, putting in different criteria, etc., to manage subcontractors or contractors in the situation like the BP oil spill. But as we move forward from that, right? Because I think, then came metrics. How do we start to look at these people critically over time? Are they improving? Are they stagnant? Are they, going the other way? What is the history of that? Once we got past this whole pre-qualification, we started getting things so that we could actually look at the data.
Yes.
Where did
Well,
we go from there?
Well, one part of going beyond pre-qualification was the training piece, right? And that was to then help standardize even at an awareness level and orientation, and then help, develop courses that met OSHA CFR levels and allowed the contractors to prove that that they were training their employees, and to put that on a badge, and to beginning, to track that at the job site. I think that was the logical next step. We had to start understanding where people trained to go on site. And then again, that's, Dr. Martin, as you know, that's an ongoing, right? Competency-based evaluations. And I mean, I don't believe that we've hit the level that we should be at right now, that any of us should be at, right? With the competency-based evaluations really is that next step. I know that the PHMSA, the OQ side of our house, that's a piece of that. But that, going back to going beyond pre-qualification, and then it was plugging in auditors, right? It was collect, trust, but verify, right? And and
Yep.
that's where we started, I think, separating ourselves, and not just ourselves, but that was the next progression of this industry, was to help our clients and help safety professionals and procurement professionals really understand. You said that you had to follow this, you submitted this, but now let me verify and vouch that you did it. How often are you doing it? Are you refreshing it? Um, and that was the next step with that, Dr. Martin, was hiring auditors, training auditors, starting to do desktop audits, developing audit protocols. And really, again, we currently use our instructor network to this day to do that. I mean, those are the safety professionals that make up, our safety industry.
Right. And I know, correct me if I'm wrong, Veriforce goes beyond that desktop audit now. That's another advancement in the field of doing
We do.
subcontractor safety, right? The desktop audits, I think pretty much every qualification system does some type of desktop audit. Some use AI, some do it manual, etc. But very few do what Veriforce does really well, which is the actual site audit, right?
Absolutely. And we use professionals again in our strategic advisory board. We use our instructors. It's not just performing the audits, I think, right? It's also helping our clients develop audit protocols and understand what are the important things on there. Each facility is unique, right? Again, we talked about standardization, but when you get to auditing, it's right. You really
It
have to
just
look.
depends.
It all
Here
depends.
we go.
That's right. That's right. And so you
I
have
was
to
waiting
look
for
at
him to
it.
give me that opening, by the way. He walked right
I
into
know
it.
it just depends, roll tide. But
Yeah.
Chris, that's one of the things I think that kind of separates, and part of the evolution is, in the beginning of contractor management, it was fill out this paperwork and we may or may check it. Okay, now we've got the paperwork and we've got a standardized questionnaire. Let's evolve into looking and reviewing at some of your documentation. There's your desktop assessments. But now it's really down to, hey, do you do what you say you do? And not only from that, but matching a consulting mentality to it. Hey, we have identified the gaps. We're willing to give you access to our Veriforce team of experts, consultants, some of which are some of the most renowned in the world, to use their brain power to tell you not only that you have a gap, but how to fix it.
That's right.
How to fix it. I think that was one of the lessons I like to tell my students. One of the lessons of the Deepwater Horizon incident is, the BP's representation on the Transocean rig that night was really just a couple of people, but they didn't call that the BP Transocean Halliburton Schlumberger MI Swico oil spill. The hiring client took the hit, and they also had some contributions to this, and we could do a whole episode of the causation of what happened. Everybody had a little bit of responsibility to the causation of that accident, but ultimately, who's responsible, right? And so when we're looking at overall risk management in a contractor network, your risk management has to be beyond indemnification and hold harmless agreements. Just because you got a piece of paper that says we're not responsible does not necessarily mean that you're not responsible. And there are all sorts of, I'll just run through some right here, where you see there's contractor issues, like the failure to maintain contractors was a key contributing factor at the BP Texas City explosion in 2005. The tunnel collapse in Seattle, Washington in 2007. General contractor overseeing the project failed to accurately manage and supervise subcontractors. The crane collapse up in New York City in 2008. Again, another failure to manage contractors performing maintenance. The West Fertilizer explosion up in West Texas in 2013. Again, there was a lack of oversight between the company and its subcontractors, its contractors. And we could go on and on to what happened at DuPont in LaPorte, Texas, the scaffold collapse that was in Houston. So all these things have a commonality in that there is a failure to adequately identify the risk within the contractor network. Like we thought it was good till it wasn't.
Correct. And you bring up, AI, and that term gets thrown around a lot, right? You can use AI to grade and to look at things. What we use AI is to, try to create a leading indicator, right? A lot of what we look at, and Dr. Martin, and I think James, we call pre-qualification, and then all of what we've been talking about. A lot of that, if not all of it, are lagging indicators that we're trying to get some type of data or some type of insight from. What I'm proud of, we, 8-10 years ago, we started looking at the 60-80 million data points in our system. And we partnered with a company that built us an A-graded model that really looks at a lot of those lagging indicators and helps put a leading indicator out there. And so just because your pre-qualification is good and you have the proper insurance and your employees have been trained properly based on data, and that's been, you know, a 25 years of data, and like I said, millions and millions of data point. There are some things that we can see that are factors that would elevate the risk of that contractor, even if on paper they looked great. And I think that's where we, as an as a industry and as an organization, we're going to really try to put tools like that into our clients' hands, where we know that the safety budget is limited. If you're going to go out and audit, you know, why audit the same 10 contractors, 20 contractors every year, right? Why not go and audit the ones that are going to bring the most risk to the table when they enter your site? That's where we have to get, and that's where we're going to help go way beyond pre-qualification and actually start becoming a leading indicator.
You said 60 to 80 million data points.
Correct.
Oh, I'd love to get my hands on that data, wouldn't you, James?
Me too. Sounds like some dissertation help, Chris. I'm gonna be calling you, man. I need some help. Right?
Or a white paper, a Veriforce white paper on the
Absolutely.
state of the industry and you know what you've learned from all these years of contractor inputs.
Yeah, and so the really the cool tool is it gives the client the leading factors that go into that. Um, and I know that you guys are going to have Katie Hill on. I think I heard maybe in a couple of weeks, and she can really give some insight on that as well. And at the end of the day, it really is. You know, we look at a lot of lagging indicators. We're trying to create a leading indicator, something to put in the hands for our client that they can go get the biggest bang for their buck when they're trying to reduce incidents and reduce risk at their job sites.
Well, I
So
think also,
I don't.
go ahead, Dr. Martin.
I was just gonna say I don't want to give away the secret sauce or anything, Chris, but where do you see all this going in the next 5 or 10 years? The subcontractor management
Well,
biz.
I don't know if that was a setup on your part or not, but I think that
Nope.
what you're saying is when you mention subcontractors, I think, right, I think that's the next level of this. When we speak to clients, whether they're using a competitor system, if they're doing it themselves, if they use our system, um, the sub of the sub, right? We talk a lot about contractors, suppliers, vendors at the top level. You get down to the secondary level or the tertiary level of that subcontractor network, and having the visibility and the evaluation of that, I think is where we have to go. We really have to understand everyone that's entering that facility. It can't just be the prime contractors, and then you have a bunch of people that are coming on site and not knowing that. So I think the visibility into the levels of subcontractor, I think that's where we're going. I think we're going to more of competency-based evaluations, right? I think that we're going to have to get to where, you know, COVID brought a lot of online training. I think we have to get to proctored training that gives people some elements of flexibility, but we have to have that instructor. I feel there, especially on the awareness levels and the orientations. I think that feedback from a professional like, you know, Dr. Moore, like you guys. Hey, if I'm entering the industry and my instructor was a computer screen and it wasn't James Junkin, I wouldn't have had as a positive experience as I had, right?
Right. Right. James, I interrupted you earlier. What were you going to
I
say?
was just going to say, I think what has evolved over the past few years and where we're is something that we've talked about before. Paper safety is not real safety, right? It just exists on paper. You know, you can have the best policies in the world, you can have the best syllabuses in the world, but if it's not making to the people in the field, then that's a huge, huge problem. And what I've seen is exactly what y'all talked about when it comes to risk by subcontractors of a contractor that we've hired. And sometimes it's a sub of a sub of a sub. I've got a fatality investigation that's going right now related to that particular instance. And all the indemnification and hold harmless agreements in the world are not going to bring that guy back from the dead.
That's
He's
right.
not going home, right? And a lot of those issues could be prevented, and a lot of injuries prevented and lives saved by taking sort of a consulting mentality and identifying the risk and the deficiencies before the incident happens. Hell, we all know what happened after the incident happened. It's so obvious anybody could see it. So, you know, you tell I'm a little passionate about that, but that's one of the things I like about being a Veriforce instructor and part of the strategic advisory board and working with Chris and these guys, because they get it. They get it, man. Ultimately, our mission statement of Veriforce is we want to bring home workers from high hazard jobs. Well, what's a high hazard job? The one that can seriously injure you or kill you, right? The one
Which a lot of those a lot of jobs fit into that. Well, you know, whether you believe it or not. So guys, I'm gonna kind of cut off the main conversation here because we've got some questions from the audience that our moderator Paula has put into the chat, and I'm going to start with the one I want, Paula, if that's okay with you. We got 3 questions in the chat. Question 2: what emerging blind spots in contractor management keeps you all up at night? And before James jumps in here, I'm going to say liars and cheats. Liars and cheats, right? Because there is an ethical consideration here that we need to take into account. People put data into the system. It may or may not be correct. The audit may or may not catch it. How do we stop that from happening so we make good decisions? That's my 5 cents there, and I'll let you guys chime in.
Yeah, it's hard to stop a liar and a cheater. Verification, I think one is, and it's dependent on what they're lying and cheating on, right? Is it policies? Is it training? Is it credentialing at the job site? We've caught people in all of those in all of those areas. And the only way to catch them is to verify and to validate the best that you can. Our worker pass that we have at the job site, that can link to a student ID, that can link to a driver's license or a passport, and drug screen and background checks. That's one way to try to at least know who's coming on site. Validating and verifying, or using an instructor network instead of random instructors to train your employees, or an instructor network that has badging and credentialing and a history to it, right? I think those are ways that you as a company can mitigate, right, some of those liars and cheaters. I know that we fight that a lot. There are people out there that train. We fought that during the blowout in the oil spill. There are people that went to federal prison for lying about being HAZO Upper 40 certified instructors. So, really, it's you have to trust but verify.
Here you go. James, are you ready for another question?
Yeah.
All right. What's the first move every safety leader should make right after this show? What is the big takeaway, and what can they do with it?
My big takeaway, if I was listening to this, depending on whether or not I was a hiring client or a contractor, but the move's the same. If I'm a contractor that hires subs, or if I'm a hiring client that hires contractors and subcontractors, the first thing I would do was think about what's my verification process in identifying the risk. What's the risk? Where's my spend and where's my risk? High risk, high spend contractors, right? So once I identify that, I'll start brainstorming what measures we have in place that trust but verify piece that Chris is talking about. How do I really know that I'm getting qualified workers that have their own set of safety management system that includes all the things I've asked about in the pre-qualification. I dare say most people's pre-qualification, when they get a sheet or a piece of paper from somebody to fill out, they've answered yes on everything, right? 100% yes, but I bet if I assess them, there's some areas of those yeses which might be maybe or not at all, right? So if I was a person that was doing this and I wanted to get started, make a list of your vendors that are high risk and high spend, and then say, how far are we going to help them in identifying any gaps in their safety management system? And then be able to put something in place. And one of the things I like about my Veriforce team here is they have a comprehensive solution. You don't have to go to one vendor here and one vendor there. It all works together within one package to be able to identify the risk and put controls in place. So that's what I do.
All right. So let's put a follow-on question to this, right? Budgets, timelines, et cetera, they're issues for people, usually for senior management, right? And if you're not using something, if you're still in paper pre-qualification, or you're not doing any pre-qualification, what is the conversation you need to have as a safety or a risk person or procurement with the C-suite to justify taking the leap into a contractor management solution? How do you make that case?
Yeah, so I think that there's a couple of ways. The first one are resources, right? What type of resources do you have to fully do what we're talking about? The pre-qualification, the ongoing auditing, the verifying of the training, the refresher dates, the verifying of the instructor network that's being utilized by your contractors. Then go to the procurement team. Who's collecting insurance? Who's verifying insurance? Who's looking at contracts? Who's looking at financial data? The resources that an organization spends doing that far outweighs the cost of what it would do to utilize a solution. And even if it was a wash, what you're getting when you use a solution like ours is a team of people that are doing that for you. So I think a lot of times safety teams, or they're restricted by resources. I think that we've seen that as a business case, it's very easy to show a safety professional how our help at checking, issuing orientations at the job site, badging people at the job site, verifying safety programs, verifying training, incident data, DOT data. When you look at everything a safety professional has to do within an organization, it's a lot. It's a lot. And we always help support that resource-wise. And I think that's an easy one. The second way I would look at is risk. We all know what the cost of an incident is. We know, the reduction of incidents. Our clients see a reduction of incidents by sometimes up to 30% over a 3 to 5 year span. And depending on how many incidents they were having that cost alone, aside from reputation and brand recognition and brand damage and all of that, I think the risk of what an incident could cost, again, far outweighs any type of cost to utilize a system like ours, or to manage your contractors and use somebody else, not do it in-house.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome answer. Thank you.
Can I follow up to that? I think
Sure.
part of it is an over-reliance sometimes on the contractual language that hiring clients and general contractors have with their subcontractors and their contractors, right? So they feel like, look, we're protected because we have a COI, or we have this indemnification and hold harmless agreements. And I mentioned that a couple of times, but that's come up in the last 3 cases I've had involving wrongful death or gross negligence claims in various jurisdictions across this country, right? that, well, we have this indemnification agreement. And then we find out, hey, from a jurisdictional perspective, this jurisdiction is refusing to support the indemnity clauses that's in my contract, and because it violates our public policy principles. So the paper and the language that I hung all my risk management on and said, this is why we hire contractors. You know, I've heard it before. Hey, my guys don't go in confined spaces. This is why we hire contractors. We're transferring the risk to them. Well, you know, you may not be totally transferring the risk to them because there are differing legal definitions across, you know, several jurisdictions that highlight that might not be sufficient enough to protect you. You have state law differences when it comes to interpretations of these indemnifications agreements. And sometimes, even though, you know, attorneys, we're dealing with a case right now, in-house counsel wrote their indemnification and hold harmless agreement, but it was very ambiguous. It didn't contain precise language. And guess what? It's being held that it's invalid. So a lot of times you got people that are really not contract experts putting all their reliance in a document that says, hey, if we're wrong, you're still wrong. And if you're wrong, and you're going to pay us regardless. That might not be enforceable. Okay. That might not be enforceable at all. So when you talk to the question that follows up, hey, budgets and timelines are an issue. How do you talk safety with the C-suite and the bosses? This is what I'm talking about, right? A comprehensive risk management plan is like insurance that allows me to sleep at night. Yep. If not, it's hoping something doesn't happen. Yep. We hope nothing happens, right? So if you have trouble selling it, it really comes down to what motivates you. Some people get religion because they see the light. Some of them got to feel the heat, right? And in this case, when it comes to hanging all your risk management and hopes on a piece of paper, you're just hoping that that piece of paper is going to be held valid. Now, what's that about? Who's going to pay for it? That's all that's about. Who's going to pay for it? But you still have loss of productivity, loss of reputation, all these things. And we saw that.
OSHA. OSHA doesn't care. OSHA doesn't care about your indemnity agreements. They don't.
OSHA doesn't care.
That's right.
You just had a H2S case out in Texas that just finally settled. Someone's going to federal prison. One of the companies paying $1 million in fines and penalties, and the other one's paying like $420,000. Think about how many audits we could have done that to prevent that.
Yep.
You know, $1 million would pay for a lot of audits.
Yep. And
so,
yep. Go ahead, Dr. Martin. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I was going to move the conversation to what I think will be our last question. It comes from Don Kramer in our audience. I know Don. Hey, Don. Hey, buddy. He's a buddy of mine. He says, I find it sometimes difficult to get smaller subcontractors to understand that their safety performance on the job site affects the entire project. They typically do not understand the management of a multi-employer work site. The management of a sub is even more difficult to manage. That is the crux of this conversation right here, right? And the future, as Chris stated earlier, of contractor safety and pre-qualification and ongoing management is just that, right? If a prime contractor or a general contractor is hiring contractors to work for them, right? They're doing their due diligence, getting them pre-qualified, monitoring their progress, looking into their safety, looking into their training, etc., doing audits, right? The next generation is instilling in that tier of contractors that they're subs. They're subs. They should be doing the same of their subs, right? It shouldn't be, although it is, that we get out to a job site and the general contractor's trying to manage everybody's safety on the job site. That there has to be some kind of proactive, systematic way for each of those tiers to manage down or manage up into the general contractor so that the general contractor doesn't have to manage to the basement. That's just my opinion. You guys want to chime in on that before we log out?
I agree 100%, Dr. Martin. And I also to Don, I think that small contractor, they really need to understand that, to your point, everyone really are moving to systems like ours, whether they're choosing us or our competitors, or they're just doing, they're replicating what we're doing in-house. That small contractor, the impact that one incident has on them and their future business is it could end their company. They could not get, if they have an incident, it's going to impact their ability to get future work with other clients. And if they, they might not be required, depending on the size or whatever they may be. But knowing that impact of an incident, everyone's looking at them. Just because they're a sub of a sub of a sub doesn't mean that on the next project they might not be, bidding to be a prime. So at some point, that incident is going to impact them, and they, I believe that they, as a business owner, I would want to make sure that I was ensuring that my employees and that I was meeting compliance so that I could find another job and find the second and third job, right? I think one incident really could hurt a small contractor in their future plans.
There's no doubt one incident can hurt a small contractor on future business, but there is this mentality. If I could change a mentality amongst small businesses, and I'm a small business, and I have a special place in my heart for small businesses. We talked about PEC and being the legacy company of Veriforce. That was a small family-run business, right? And
I was
look what it
employee
is
number
today.
9. We had 9 employees.
There you go. But there's this mentality, because I'm a small company, that the rules only apply to the bigger companies that have bigger resources, right? Look, man, I didn't write those regulations, nor did I write the laws related to tort, right? It applies to us all, big company, little company, small company. I still have to identify hazards and protect my workers. I still have to perform necessary training. But understanding the smaller the organization, the less resources probably increases the risk that you're going to get someone who might be performing electrical work that's not properly trained, or working at heights that's not properly trained, or performing some job task for which they're not completely competent, or operating material handling equipment, or whatever that you see that I always find post-incident, right? So what I think Veriforce does, and through the qualification of these contractors, is help you identify that risk before we identify it in the accident investigation, where everybody's going to suffer, but most of all, the person who got injured.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Be
James.
proactive, right? Proactive instead of reactive.
Absolutely.
All right, fellas, that was our last. Thank you, Don, for that question from our audience. Everybody else, don't be shy. When you come on these live shows, we're here to answer your questions, especially hopefully related to what we're talking about, but sometimes we can take something a little off topic too. But thanks, Chris, for coming on and sharing your insight, your knowledge, your wisdom with us. And I was wondering if James would take us out.
Hey, thank y'all for joining us today in the live session. And thank you for those of us who are going to be viewing this podcast or listening to this podcast on Veriforce's YouTube channel, or over on Spotify, or over on Apple Podcast, or the Veriforce website itself. We do this for you. And hopefully you'll be staying tuned to us as we come through our 100th episode. And if you're just joining us, we have 92 episodes, including today, of a library of amazing guests and information and a lot of stuff Dr. Martin's putting out there, and some of my silliness that you can go back to. And maybe there's some topics that can help you in your safety practice. But we do this for you. To get notified, go over and hit that subscribe button. That way you know every Tuesday you're going to get notification that a new episode is coming out. Hit that like button. Share with your friends. Listen, I told you, Your mama wants you to listen to the risk matrix. It's okay to drive and listen to the risk matrix. The guy from Cortex last week said it. It's okay. As long as you got telematics on board, you can listen to this show when you're driving to your next location. But thank you guys for all that you do to bring workers home safe from high hazard jobs. Thank you, Chris, for coming on to us. Until next time, y'all keep bringing those workers home safe. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Out.